All right, welcome to week one. Once again, welcome to class. I plan to post these presentations for each module. I'm planning for each video to be 8 to 12 minutes long because educational studies find that posting hour-long plus videos is a recipe for lots of students tuning out. This week's video is focused on the skills you need, or at least this week's this module is focused on the skills you'll need to excel in this particular course. But these are skills that are broadly transferable to most of your courses that you will take over the course of your academic career. We're going to access the reading for this week by clicking on the week one, module one reading and adaptive questions assignment. You'll want to go ahead and read the material before you try to answer the questions. The first thing you're going to learn is how to distinguish a primary from a secondary source. Primary sources are original first-hand accounts of an issue or a topic. They're contemporaneous. They're happening near real time, within a day or so. Secondary sources, in contrast, are written at some remove after an event by someone who wasn't present at the time. An example of a primary source would be a newspaper account of an event written by a trained journalist who was on the ground during or immediately after an event. So to illustrate, in the immediate aftermath of the shootings in Uvalde, Texas, just about every network had journalists on the ground asking questions of residents, law enforcement, and local governmental officials. A person there on ground, writing or recording what happened, would constitute a primary source for that particular event if you were looking to write about school shootings. An example of a secondary source might be a textbook written on a given subject. So, for example, two social scientists, Drs. Gillian Peterson and James Densley, published a book in 2021 entitled The Violence Project, which collects data, including perpetrator accounts, to develop a database of mass shooters with the hope of better understanding why some people resort to that kind of violence, what indicators there are that a person might be contemplating that kind of violence, in hopes that we can better identify and interdict mass killers before they actually commit a mass shooting. That's a good illustration of a secondary source. Another important skill that you're going to develop over the course of this week and hopefully over the course of the summer is your developing your critical thinking faculties. So essential to that skill is how to frame questions about the information that you're reading and looking to understand. So to carry forward the recent mass shooting, framing questions in why terms helps us get at the issue more effectively. So what a good why question might be. Why do so many mass shootings occur in the United States and not in other countries? I think it's clear that there's an answer. Some people might not like that answer, but it clearly is the fact that we have so many guns in society. So how we look for answers to that question or any other question is an important aspect of critical thinking. For example, if you only look at mass shooting from one ideological perspective, if you are a Second Amendment absolutist, you're basically going to say there is no way to legislate on guns because everyone has an absolute right to own a gun. Everyone. And again, the problem there is I don't think that that's necessarily going to be a full perspective on the phenomenon of mass shootings. So again, whether it be liberal, conservative, or some other ideology, you have to distinguish between objective analysis and advocacy pieces that are seeking a particular policy outcome. So a balanced approach to learning about an issue like mass shootings would be, to look at scholarly articles on mass shootings, like the book I mentioned above or earlier. But you'd also want to read journalistic analyses and even read the advocacy arguments of both sides of the debate, because that way you can better weigh the evidence that that all sides are trying to marshal in advocacy of a particular position. Again, you want to understand the motivations of people that are engaged in a passionate debate like the ones about school shootings and what to do about them. The reading also offers the 14th Amendment as an illustration of a primary source and how to go about analyzing it. So, Section 1 of the 14th Amendment reads as follows: all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. So how do you go about analyzing the text of the 14th Amendment? Who authored it? Who were the audience? Why was the 14th Amendment drafted? What historical context led to proposing and ratifying such a document? Another valuable skill addressed in this module is learning how to interpret the information from tables and figures. Tables and graphs are visual interpretations of statistical data. Quantitative analysis helps us to see trend lines and patterns of behavior. To illustrate the claim, I advocate background checks because I lost a loved one to a mass shooting. That's what we would call an anecdote, and it can be a powerful source of information, but it really only gets us so far. It basically helps listeners understand why you prefer a particular policy. So in contrast, a chart or a graph can give us a broader understanding of the meaning of patterns of behavior. So you can create a chart that shows the rise and fall of mass shootings and analyze those shootings in relation to other factors. For example, we know that interpersonal violence shot up over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. Why does gun violence often escalate in times of economic crisis? Tables and graphs give us important ways of getting to an objective analysis of the question. And one thing we know, just in the 2022, there have been 27 school shootings, in just 5 months. Another important skill addressed in this module is how we can be better informed. So how we go about informing ourselves is vitally important, because too often we're drawn to the information that confirms what we already believe, and we exclude any information that challenges our beliefs. Social scientists describe that as cognitive dissonance, that we have this tendency to suppress information that upsets us, and nobody likes being wrong, right? So in an important sense, the part of the problem is the sheer volume of information available. I teach a class on the role of the media in the governing process, and a metaphor we often use in that class is drinking from the fire hose. There's just so much information coming at us. It's really hard, and so you can't read everything, every news account that's coming out at any particular point in time. There's just too much information. But with the right skills, you can develop a news gathering strategy that helps you better understand an issue and how it affects you, and it puts you in a position as a citizen to know what to do about it. For too many Americans, the problem is that their news gathering is entirely one-sided. It's Fox News, they turn it on in the morning, they turn it off at night, and they don't accept any other information. And people on the left do the same thing. Relying on any one news source is a problem, and it encourages zero-sum, my side is right and your side is wrong kinds of thinking, and that's hard. It makes it hard for us to govern when we simply don't accept information, when we don't have a common frame of reference. So what is fake news? We'll learn that fake news is basically misinformation. It can include conspiracy theories, ideologically inspired advocacy masquerading as news, and outright propaganda. Social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube have greatly increased the volume of fake news that people have to wade through, and greatly increased the likelihood that people will be misinformed, simply because, again, Facebook people have said, we're not journalists, and yet they're sucking up all the advertising dollars that journalism, that previously, formed the basis of income for most news gathering organization. So here's an example of how misinformation can work. Over the course of the 2016 presidential election, rumors were rampant that Republican nominee Donald Trump had basically a conflict of interest concerning his business dealings with Russia. Late in the campaign, a story was published in Slate magazine alleging that there were strange electronic communications between the Trump organization and Alfa Bank, which is a Russian-owned entity with ties to Russian President Vladimir Putin. A lot of liberals bought the story, the Slate story whole hog. Why? Because they wanted to believe it, and frankly, because Trump did have a lot of odd, dealings with Russia. His campaign manager had worked, in Ukraine for pro-Russian candidates, and so, and there's a lot more, that caused people, and including law enforcement, to be very concerned about what was going on. So the point is that we all need to be both curious and skeptical of the information coming at us. We have to look at different sources of information and weigh their credibility. Politically powerful people have enormous incentives to try and work the refs, to shape the news in ways that are favorable to their preferred political objectives. We as citizens need to develop sophisticated news gathering strategies to differentiate real news and propaganda. I will tell you, I read Slate, but I don't take Slate as gospel. I recognize that they can get things wrong at times. So there is more to this module, but the main thing we're trying to learn this week is how to avoid what social scientists describe as premature epistemic closure, which is a fancy way of saying, avoid jumping to conclusions. An important aspect of objectivity is to maintain that sense of suspended judgment. If we can avoid leaping to conclusions, we can make better decisions as citizens. So please take these assignments seriously, and if there's anything you don't understand, please don't hesitate to contact me.